120 rooms, 51 acres inside Windsor Great Park, a property worth approximately £30 million, and Prince Edward pays peppercorn rent on it, meaning almost nothing, because 20 years ago he made a series of decisions so legally precise that not even the King of England can undo them now. While the public was focused on Andrew being evicted from Royal Lodge, while the conversation around royal property was at its most heated in decades, Edward and Sophie were sitting quietly in a legal fortress they had spent years constructing, and nobody had put the full picture together until the documents started surfacing. The Bagshot Park story is not what most people think it is. It is not a scandal. It is not an embarrassment. It is the story of the one member of the royal family who read every document, paid every bill, and built a position so legally sound that scrutiny only made it stronger. Today, we are going through every verified detail: what Edward paid, what he was given, what he built, and why, in a climate where royal property deals are under more public pressure than at any point in modern history, his position remains essentially untouchable. What Bagshot Park actually is. Before the numbers, the context. Bagshot Park is a Grade II listed Tudor Gothic mansion located near Bagshot in Surrey, approximately 11 miles south of Windsor. It sits on 51 acres within the designated area of Windsor Great Park. The main house contains 120 rooms. Queen Victoria completed the building in 1879 for her third son, Prince Arthur, Duke of Connaught. It has been a royal residence ever since. The National Audit Office report on the transaction stated that the final cost of renovations was £2.96 million. The Crown Estate paid £1.6 million, and the estimated excess of £1.38 million was paid by Prince Edward. When the Army Chaplains Department vacated the property in April 1996, after nearly 50 years of military use, Bagshot Park was in poor condition. The Crown Estate had no immediate plans for it as a royal residence. There were serious discussions about converting it into a hotel or conference center. Instead, the then Earl and Countess of Wessex took over the tenancy. And what Edward did next is the part that changes the entire story. The investment nobody remembers. In March 1998, Edward signed a 50-year lease on Bagshot Park at an initial rent of £5,000 per year. That low rent was not a gift. It came with a condition. Edward had to restore and maintain a property that the Crown Estate had effectively written off. He did. The prince rented it from the Crown Estate initially for £5,000 a year, then after renovation, rising to £90,000 a year, subject to 15-year rent reviews linked to RPI. According to the NAO report, the property leased by the prince does not include commercial farmland or woodland. The total renovation cost reached approximately £3 million. The Crown Estate contributed $1.6 million. Edward personally funded the remaining $1.38 million, money he had earned himself, before becoming a full-time working royal. The lease agreement permits subletting of the stable block. That detail, subletting permitted, becomes significant later. But first, the most consequential decision Edward made. The 2007 extension, and why it changed everything. In 2007, 9 years into his tenancy, Edward made a move that transformed his position from a comfortable lease into something considerably more permanent. In 2007, Prince Edward extended the lease to 150 years for £5 million. The extended lease requires Edward to pay a nominal peppercorn rent on Bagshot Park rather than a market-rate annual rental. £5 million, paid up front, through his company Eclipse Nominees Limited, for a 150-year lease. Let that sit for a moment. 150 years means Bagshot Park is secured not just for Edward and Sophie's lifetimes, but for their children's lifetimes, and their grandchildren's. The Duke of Edinburgh title that Edward received in April 2023, the title Prince Philip carried for more than 70 years, now has a home attached to it that is legally secured until well into the 22nd century. And in exchange for that £5 million payment, Edward's annual rent dropped from £90,000 to peppercorn, essentially nothing. The 51-acre estate, valued at approximately £30 million, features a 120-room mansion that the king's youngest brother leases under highly favorable terms. A £30 million property, peppercorn rent, a 150-year lease, paid for with his own money. The scrutiny that arrived in 2025. For years, The Bagshot Park arrangement sat quietly in the background of royal property discussions. Then, Andrew happened. The extended public battle over Andrew's position at Royal Lodge, the revelations that he had been paying essentially nothing for a 30-room Windsor property for years without any corresponding investment or renovation, put royal leases under a level of scrutiny they had not experienced before. In stark contrast, the younger generation appears to be navigating the property landscape differently, perhaps anticipating this very shift in public sentiment. Prince William and Kate Middleton have reportedly moved into Forest Lodge, described as their forever home, where they are paying open market rent. And suddenly, people started looking at Bagshot Park. The Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh also showed that they have been paying peppercorn amount for the property. Edward initially leased the property for 50 years for £5,000 a year in March 1998, and the sum went to £90,000 a year, per the National Audit Office. The surface optics were uncomfortable. Peppercorn rent, 120 rooms, 51 acres, £30 million valuation. But the moment anyone looked beneath the surface, the situation became considerably more complicated for the critics than for Edward. The stables, and the controversy that backfired. In early 2026, a specific detail about Bagshot Park emerged that generated immediate headlines. According to reports in The Sun, Prince Edward and Sophie have been letting out a stable block at Bagshot Park in Surrey, with the proceeds flowing to the royal couple rather than into public coffers. The converted stables, situated roughly 400 meters from the main residence, were recently marketed as office accommodation at £10,834 monthly. Edward and Sophie earned £130,000 by subletting converted stables. Critics condemned the arrangement as fundamentally unfair to taxpayers. Norman Baker, the former Liberal Democrat Home Affairs Minister, branded the situation outrageous. Any money raised from those stables should only be going to one place: the Crown Estate, Mr. Baker told the publication. The criticism was instant and pointed. A royal couple subletting part of a Crown property for private income. The optics looked bad. And then, Edward's lawyers pointed to the lease. The lease agreement permits subletting of the stable block. It was not just permitted, it was explicitly written into the agreement the Crown Estate had signed in 1998. Edward had not found a loophole or exploited an oversight. He had negotiated a term, had it documented, and exercised a right that was legally his. His lease legally permitted subletting, and he had negotiated terms that secured his position regardless of public perception. While critics seized on the optics, Edward's lawyers quietly confirmed that his rights were indisputable. The controversy, when examined properly, became an advertisement for how carefully Edward had constructed his position. Every challenge revealed another layer of preparation: the Public Accounts Committee and what it found. The scrutiny did not stop with newspaper reports. The Public Accounts Committee launched an inquiry in December into royal property financing, demanding the Crown Estate disclose the terms under which family members occupy their residences. This was a formal parliamentary investigation, the kind that cannot be managed with a carefully worded palace statement. And what the inquiry found, when it examined Bagshot Park, was documentation that supported Edward's position at every point: the original lease, the renovation costs, and who paid them, the NAO confirmation of market rate, the 2007 extension and its terms. Everything in order, everything properly recorded. According to YouGov polls from January 2026, Edward and Sophie enjoyed approval ratings between 50 to 51%, while Camilla's ratings lagged behind at 19 to 12%. The public approval numbers are worth noting, not as a measure of right and wrong, but as context for understanding why the institution found it increasingly difficult to apply pressure on the Edinburgh household. Edward and Sophie are among the most popular members of the working royal family. They completed 313 and 235 engagements respectively in 2025. They have spent years quietly doing the work, while others attracted headlines for different reasons. The combination, legally unassailable position, documented investment, high public approval, and a genuine record of service, made Bagshot Park essentially untouchable. Edward versus Andrew, the contrast that defines everything. The Andrew comparison is unavoidable, and it matters. Just weeks prior, it was revealed that Andrew had not paid rent for 2 decades on the massive 30-room Windsor property, Royal Lodge. He had merely paid peppercorn rent, which is a negligible amount paid in order to keep a legal agreement binding. Two brothers, two royal properties, two completely different approaches. Andrew occupied Royal Lodge without making the investments his lease required, without maintaining the property to the standard expected, and without paying anything approaching market rate. When pressure finally came, he had no legal fortress to stand behind, no documented investment, no NAO-confirmed market testing, no £5 million upfront payment securing a century and a half of occupancy. Edward, by contrast, had done everything the institution asked, and more. He paid the renovation costs that the Crown estate would not cover. He accepted rent increases when the NAO confirmed market value. He extended the lease through a properly structured commercial arrangement. He maintained the property, he did the work, and when scrutiny arrived, parliamentary scrutiny, press scrutiny, the scrutiny that comes with being in a family where one brother's property scandal was reshaping public expectations of all of them, Edward's preparation meant there was nothing to find. Bagshot Park was not merely a home, it was a symbol. Within its walls, Edward and Sophie maintained autonomy, insulated from immediate interference, and positioned to exercise influence quietly. What this means going forward. The Bagshot Park story has revealed something important about the current state of the royal family and its relationship with property, money, and accountability. The post-Andrew scrutiny created a moment where the public, the press, and Parliament were all looking at how royal family members occupy crown properties. The assumption, reasonable given what had emerged about Andrew, was that further investigation would reveal further problems. What it revealed at Bagshot Park was the opposite. A case study in how a royal tenancy should work. Investment made. Costs documented. Terms publicly verified. Rights exercised within the agreement. Rent paid at NAO-confirmed market rate before the lease extension was negotiated commercially. Prince Edward originally secured a 50-year lease on Bagshot Park in 1998, initially paying £5,000 annually before the rent increased to £90,000 following his £1.36 million investment in renovations. In 2007, the lease was extended through an agreement with Edward's company, Eclipse Nominees Limited, under which he paid £5 million upfront for a 150-year term described as market-tested. That phrase, market-tested, is the one that matters most in the current climate. It means an independent assessment confirmed the commercial terms were reasonable. Edward did not negotiate a sweetheart deal. He negotiated a deal that was formally assessed as fair. The 150-year lease is now the foundation of the Edinburgh household's long-term position. The Duke of Edinburgh title, the Bagshot Park estate, and the working royal role that Edward and Sophie have built through decades of consistent service. All of it rests on a legal base that the documents confirm and the scrutiny has only strengthened. Charles is king. He has considerable authority over many aspects of royal life. But the lease Edward holds on Bagshot Park predates his reign, was market-tested, was documented by the National Audit Office, and runs until well into the next century. It is, by any reasonable legal reading, out of his reach. That is the full verified picture, from the £5,000 annual rent in 1998 to the £30 million estate secured by a 150-year lease in 2026. Here is what I want to know from you. In a royal family where property arrangements are under more scrutiny than at any point in modern history, do you think Edward's approach, invest, document, pay your way, is the model? Or does the outcome still not sit right with you? Drop your honest take in the comments. This community always goes deeper than the headlines. Subscribe if you are not already. Turn on notifications. The royal property story is still developing. Beatrice, Eugenie, and the wider questions about who pays for what are all live, and the next verified update will be here first. Thank you for watching.